Lady Vanessa, I hope your watch over Mondstadt remains unclouded.
Jean is the acting Grand Master of the Knights of Favonius in Mondstadt, and a 5-star Anemo character you can get from Genshin Impact's standard Wish banner. Jean is a strong team healer who can also hold her own in battles, and she is one of the more beneficial 5-star characters you can get from the standard banner. In this video, we'll look at different ways to build her character for different roles and teams, and give a good overview of how to play as her. Since Jean is a standard banner 5-star character, it means she's more available to a wider number of players. She's a popular choice for a team healer support role, but she can also fill a sub DPS role fairly well too with the right setup. Let's begin by looking at what Jean needs to ascend to max level. Her local specialty item is dandelion seeds, which are found throughout Mondstadt. As a new player, it took me a while to figure out how to actually get these, but the trick to it is using Anemo on the dandelions to collect their seeds. Her normal enemy drops are the masks from defeating hilichurls, which are found throughout Mondstadt, Liyue, and other regions of Teyvat too. Since hilichurls are common enemies, it makes the masks easy to gather as you play normally, without having to go out of your way too much. Her boss drops are hurricane seeds, obtained from defeating the Anemo hypostasis boss, found in the northern parts of Mondstadt. For her talent levels, Jean uses the resistance materials, which can be obtained on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays from the Forsaken Rift domain in the Springvale area of Mondstadt. For her weekly boss drops to raise her talents beyond level 6, she needs the Dvalin's Plume item from the Storm Terror battle in Mondstadt. My recommended priority for leveling her talents would be to first focus on her elemental burst, as that is where most of her healing comes from, and then her elemental skill next, since that's a good source of damage and generating energy particles for her. I would also recommend leveling her normal attacks, though you could leave them at level 1 if you prefer, and that's fine too, but Jean does decent damage with them, and can also heal her entire team just from using her normal attacks, so to me, it felt worth it to maximize her potential. My thoughts on this were, since I would want to use some normal attacks to help with healing her teammates at times, I might as well strengthen those attacks while I was at it. Jean has multiple build paths you could follow depending on the kind of team you plan to pair her with. Most players will want to focus on her healing support capabilities as her primary role, and with that build, she is very versatile and able to fit a wide variety of teams. However, she also has a few builds that focus on more specific areas. She can be built with maximizing her potential as a sub DPS role in mind, or she can also have a support role that prioritizes buffing the attack of your main damage dealer. Her ideal stats, weapons, and artifact sets to focus on will vary somewhat depending on the role you choose for her, so you'll want to first decide which role sounds the most appealing for your play preferences, and go from there in terms of what you'll need to maximize Jean's potential. Jean has a wide variety of weapons that she can benefit from using, and while some of them are more suited to particular roles than others, the list is rather large in general. This is helpful as it means players will not have to struggle to find a weapon that can work well for Jean, but to help guide your decision, let's look at some of her most beneficial weapons to use overall. Some great 5-star weapon choices include Freedom Sworn, Primordial Jade Cutter, Skyward Blade, and Aquila Favonia. There are many 4-star weapons Jean can use to her advantage, but standouts include the event-exclusive Festering Desire, the craftable 4-star Amenoma Kageuchi, the fishing-exclusive Fluvsandra Ferryman, and the Favonia Sword. I'm going to bring special attention to the Amenoma Kageuchi weapon in particular. While it may not be her overall best weapon, it is still an excellent choice, as it's one of her most versatile and accessible weapons. It is available to every player in the game because you can get the forging blueprint for it by completing the Farmer's Treasure World Quest in Inazuma. And on top of that, it also provides both attack percent and energy recharge, which are of benefit to Jean regardless of what build you choose for her. By comparison, the Favonia sword, for example, while offering superior energy recharge, doesn't provide much in the way of attack percent buffs. And even the 5-star Aquila Favonia, while providing very nice attack percent and physical damage buffs that Jean can take advantage of, does not provide any additional energy recharge. So, by all means, if you have one of her more suitable weapons like Primordial Jade Cutter or Freedom Sworn, absolutely use those. But otherwise, you may wish to consider the Amenoma Kageuchi for a balanced and beneficial choice of weapon that fits all of her different builds and roles. There are a few weapon choices that are more suited to specific roles than others, so let's discuss a few of those now. If you are building Jean with a sub DPS role in mind, you'll want to maximize her damage output from her skill and burst. As such, the 4-star Sacrificial Sword becomes a very good choice for her with this focus in particular. Its unique ability to have a chance to end the cooldown period of an elemental skill allows Jean to more frequently use her skill to deal damage to enemies. It also provides an abundance of energy recharge for her as well. If you are instead building Jean as an attack buffer support role to strengthen your main DPS character, then the Favonia sword becomes an even better option than usual. This is because it has a very high amount of energy recharge when built with crit rate stats, and the attack buff that she provides will trigger whenever Jean uses her elemental burst. So the idea is to quickly get her burst ready to use again after its cooldown timer ends. It's worth noting that this approach can also work well for her healer support role too. For her artifacts, the set you want to equip for her will also vary, and it depends on the role she'll be playing on her team. For a healer support role, Jean's best choice for artifacts is the 4-piece bonus from Viridescent Venerer. This allows her to lower enemy resistances for her teammates to deal more damage to enemies. The artifact stats to focus on for this build are attack percent or energy recharge for the Sands piece, Anemo damage bonus for the goblet, and either healing bonus, crit rate, or crit damage for the circlet, depending on what you feel she would benefit from having the most. Her best substats for this role are attack percent, energy recharge, crit rate, and crit damage. For a damage-focused sub-DPS role, you can still choose a 4-piece Viridescent Venerer, but you may also prefer a 2-piece Viridescent Venerer for the damage bonus and a 2-piece attack percent boosting set, like Gladiator's Finale, as an alternative approach. Her artifact stat focus shifts a bit here too. For the Sands piece, you want attack percent. The goblet remains Anemo damage bonus, and for the circlet, her best choices are crit rate or crit damage. Her ideal substats remain the same as her healer support role, with the exception of Elemental Mastery becoming more useful to include, as it helps boost overall damage from elemental reactions. For the attack buff focused build, it's essentially the same as her healer support build for artifacts. The only difference, and it's a big one, is that she will want the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige artifact set instead of Viridescent Venerer. This is what enables her to focus more on increasing the attack of her teammates, but otherwise, in terms of the artifact stats to focus on, she can be built the same way as her healer support role. To round out her artifact suggestions, if you are a newer player and these artifact sets are still out of reach, you can also equip Jean with 4 pieces of the Exile set, which increases energy recharge for her entire party. Next, let's look at some other characters she pairs well with on a team. Her healer support role can benefit almost any team composition, and so she's very flexible and helpful to have as your main team healer. She also is surprisingly beneficial to use with all Anemo teams, or combination Anemo and Geo teams, which aren't able to create elemental reactions together on their own. So if you want to use Jean with other Anemo characters, or pair her up with an Anemo teammate and 2 Geo teammates, she'll be able to benefit Anemo DPS characters like Heizo, Xiao, and Wanderer, and can pair well with characters like Noelle, Zhongli, Farzan, or Albedo quite comfortably. Jean also plays very well alongside Furina, and is able to easily create fanfare stacks for her, so you may wish to build a team around this duo and add in powerful main DPS characters like Nurvalet, Raiden, or Clorand, and sub-DPS characters like Yaimiko, Elon, or Fischl, just for a few possible examples. Last but not least, Jean has a special affinity with Bennett, so much so that I saved this for the last on purpose, because there is a completely separate build for Jean specifically for her teams with Bennett. Online you will often find these teams are dubbed Sunfire, but I'll just be referring to them more generally here. Regardless, if you want to build a team with both Jean and Bennett working together, to take full advantage of these two, you'll want to use Bennett's Elemental Burst and follow up immediately with Jean's Burst right on top of that. This is the core gameplay mechanic that makes these two work well together and is the uniqueness of their team synergy. A lot of pyro damage will get swirled by Jean's burst, and enemies caught in the area will definitely be wishing they were somewhere else. In order to maximize this team's potential though, a completely separate build exists for Jean to focus on different weapons and artifact stats. The focus shifts to Elemental Mastery stat being the priority with this team, as it's the swirl reactions damage that you want to enhance. So her best weapon for this team becomes the 5-star Freedom Sworn. If you don't have that available, great 4-star options that provide Jean with increased Elemental Mastery include the Weapon Banner exclusive Seafrost's Moonlight, the craftable 4-star Iron Sting, or the event exclusive Tokabo Shigure if you have it. In a pinch, you could even use the 3-star Dark Iron Sword, but its ability is more focused around electro reactions, so would mainly only benefit Jean for the Elemental Mastery stat boost, unless she also has an electro teammate. For most players, the Iron Sting is going to be the most accessible and versatile choice. And likewise for her artifact stat focus, Elemental Mastery becomes more important with this team. So for this setup in particular, you would want to choose Elemental Mastery main stats on the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet pieces. Her substats to focus on from there are Elemental Mastery for the Flower and Plume pieces, attack percent, crit rate, crit damage, and energy recharge, similar to her other build paths. She still benefits most from a 4-piece Viridescent Venerer set on Bennett teams, however, since the damage output is related to Swirl, so you can continue focusing on that same artifact domain to gather more of its set pieces. Let's look at how to play as Jean and use her effectively. First of all, Jean's normal attacks do fairly decent damage compared to many other support or sub-DPS characters, but even more helpful, when her second passive talent unlocks, she becomes able to randomly heal the entire team just by connecting with her normal attacks. No other setup or prerequisite is required to enable this. This way of healing is not particularly strong, but it does benefit the entire team, and it will increase the higher her attack stat. So the more attack percent stat boost she has, the greater her healing in general. Her charged attack actually knocks enemies up into the air a little ways, and can be situationally useful in interrupting their attacks or generally disrupting whatever they were about to do. Her elemental skill has 2 forms, tap and hold. With a quick tap of the button, she'll deal Anemo damage to nearby enemies and generate elemental particles to recharge some of her energy. This damage also launches smaller enemies away from her, so it can be a useful tool in keeping opponents from swarming. The hold version instead shifts the camera view to behind Jean's shoulder, and she generates a wind vortex. Enemies nearby will get lifted off the ground for a few moments, and then you can aim with the camera in a direction you want Jean to launch them away from her. This can be useful if there are multiple enemies around Jean and you want to gather them all up, dealing damage to them and launching them away from her position in a particular direction. It can take some getting used to though. As a personal example, Jean was one of my first 5-star characters in the game, and I didn't understand at first that you could just tap her skill button for quick damage to nearby enemies. So I struggled with using her elemental skill effectively until I better understood that. It is often much quicker and easier to use the tap version instead of the hold version to do a quick burst of damage and launch nearby enemies away without breaking up the flow of battle. But in most cases, her elemental burst is going to be the primary focus of her abilities. It's the main source of her healing, and it does Anemo damage in a wide area around her. When she initially uses it, your entire team is healed for a significant amount. In addition, your active character that's on the field will get periodically healed by standing in the circle it creates, and any pyro, cryo, hydro, or electro elements inside of the circle will be repeatedly swirled by her Anemo, causing increased damage. The outer perimeter of the circle also damages any opponents who pass through it, so you can use Jean's skill to launch enemies out of the circle and cause more damage, or any opponents who decide to come running at her from outside of the circle will take increased damage upon entering it too. So in general, if you are relying on Jean for your team's healing, most of it will come from her burst activation and the healing over time for your on-field character if they stand within the circle. But in a tight spot, you can also switch to Jean and do some normal attacks with her to supplement healing for the team. And after a few times of using her elemental skill to help generate energy particles, her energy gauge should be full again, and she'll be ready to activate her burst for the full party healing again. If you're using Jean for her attack buffing or Bennett teams, then her burst is equally crucial to the play mechanics. When it activates, that's also what triggers the attack buff for her teammates. So you would switch to the main damage dealers on her team after that. And for Bennett, if you use their bursts back to back, it will maximize the pyro damage that Jean's burst can swirl. Finally, we'll discuss Jean's Constellations. Since Jean is a standard banner 5-star character, the average player is more likely to receive multiple copies of her over time. So, unlike most 5-stars with featured banners only coming around once a year, you could get Jean at any time from the standard banner or by losing a 50-50 on the featured banners. Her first constellation specifically increases the speed and damage of the hold version of her elemental skill. Her second constellation is far more useful and beneficial to different playstyles. Whenever she picks up an elemental orb or particle herself, she buffs the team's attack speed and movement speed. These are rather rare buffs in Genshin Impact, so being able to give this benefit to characters in such a simple way proves quite valuable, especially with slower attacking DPS characters. Like most characters, her third and fifth constellations increase the level of her elemental skill and burst, which is always a helpful thing, but it's also pretty much a standard for the game at this point too, so no surprises here. But her fourth constellation is another interesting one. This helps reduce enemy Anemo resistances within the circle created by her elemental burst. In other words, if you are using Jean on a team that has Anemo DPS characters, she'll be able to periodically increase their damage output just by using her burst. Finally, her sixth constellation, should you manage to get 7 total copies of her from the banners over time, provides a nice damage reduction while her burst is active, and for a little while after it ends too. While not essential, it's certainly beneficial to have. So with that, you should have a better idea of how to play and build Jean. She has a lot of versatility and is still very viable in the game today, and is one of the more useful characters you can get from the standard banner pool. If you enjoyed the content this video had to offer, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like. And if you want to see more guides like this, be sure to subscribe to my channel to receive updates whenever I put out new videos. If you're interested, you can check out all the ones I've made already right here. Thank you for taking the time to watch to the end. Until next time.